Lo ne ekoba. No hani bi ajele wa. Ne bi efimo ame atashia amenye amebajano.
He will use pillow to cover my head. Then he will use his hands to choke my vagina.
We met them to educate and train them on the use of Microsoft Teams, Skype, and Zoom.
We were asked to stay home to learn on our own. Learning on our own was very, very challenging.
The COVID-19 pandemic has since December 2019 wreaked havoc globally, killing millions of people with an adverse impact on all facets of life, including education and the economy.
It hasn't been easy at all because as private teachers we're not being paid. So as a mother and a family woman, I have to try a way of keeping my family, a way of surviving. So me, for instance, I have to try to make some weed cap, sell it, sell sanitizers, sell car air freshener, just to support my family so that I'll be able to withstand the pandemic.
While some had to bear negative impact of the deadly disease economically, others, particularly young girls, had to undergo emotional stress, with some suffering various forms of abuse at home while schools remained closed.
The coronavirus is a bad disease and it makes me stop school to make my stepfather have advantage of me. That time we go to but when we vacate. And the time my mother always gone to work, and every day he will call me that I should come and sweep his room for him. So when I go, then he will catch me, then he will use pillow to cover my head. Then he will use his hands to choke my vagina, inside my vagina. When you told me that if I tell anybody, he will kill me. But I tried to tell my mother, so the time I was trying to tell my mother, then he was giving me sign that I should not tell, otherwise he will kill me. During the corona era, we were asked to stay at home for our safety. Staying at home was very challenging because sometimes you pick the book and you don't know which page to read or which chapter to start from. Sometimes you try to learn from 3 to 5 pages, and at the same time, but at the end of the day, you end up learning nothing. We weren't able to learn with our classmates and teachers in school. And we were even introduced to the electronic learning. And even with the electronic learning, it's also had its own merits and demerits. Not every student had access to it. It wasn't fun learning at home, but when we were at school, we were learning with our classmates and teachers. It was very, very fun.
Since the outbreak of the disease in Ghana, the government has put in place measures to cushion citizens as the pandemic rages on. But how has these efforts helped the vulnerable women and girls?
Credit obu na no ho feel lombi na ka ja chibe wole ho increase no ni bi na ho feel den che ke obeshika do ba credit tele ho ba feel double no covid den tele e ke na gba agbo ba ha wo bi na difference ni o meji ake loan na ekoba no we ha ni bi ajele wa ne bi efimo ame atashia amenye amebaja no
This visually impaired lady, who wants to remain anonymous, had to contend with people wanting to take sexual advantages before offering any form of assistance to her.
You know, as a person with a disability, Sometimes it may happen that you're going somewhere and you need someone to help you. Because of the coronavirus, you find it very difficult. I heard that the government was sharing things and stuff, but I didn't get anybody to accompany me to the place. So I didn't get anything. I didn't get anything that the government shared. I didn't get anything. Because I heard they said they're sharing rice, oil and stuff, but I didn't get anything. Because as a lady, you know, being visually impaired and you don't have anybody then and stuff, you know, it's very difficult. So I sometimes cry for my fellow visually impaired that don't have anybody to cater for. Some of us, the visually impaired, some of us are not in Accra, others are in Accra. And those that are not in Accra, they don't get the help. You don't get the help, you know, because it may happen they are sharing things, but you know, there may be some people in there without getting the things. So for me, what I would say is that if they are sharing something, they should please make sure that it gets to those outside Accra.
Irrespective of the challenges brought by the pandemic, some women believe it has challenged them to be more innovative in going about their businesses.
Nani baleji ke nakambia me wojela wo me. Si me majority of me say pi hu ji me ni ameshegbe. No me pole aja me shameden cha me nya me ba. Amagaba. Ikaba on de me hu ba ma me papa. O force no awoja chekuna aba ma me keke. Wa mo yinmo mokopo ya wa mo ade kakobe eke won le 1 week every day wa jeno de poto mi every day wa jeno de poto mi wa fele yinmo woni ipaba no won ko fa kaji wa mokoye en SSB arojonji amba nya me wa wo won ko fa na me bom de ko na me bon wa wo nte wo bi ye ba ba o di me ni your problem especially jane no hu wo di mo your problem ka government ye wa moko ni ba wa wo bona ha jela nga
Just like many other governments around the world, socio-economic policies and relief measures were put together with less consultation with stakeholders and without gender considerations.
Already, even before the coronavirus, women with disabilities have had series of discriminations and stigmatization because they are, first of all, you have women with physical disabilities or well visible disabilities, you have women with children with special needs, and so the community or the society already puts them in a state of stigma or discrimination. And then comes COVID-19. So during one of the periods where one of the mothers had to go for food items from a distribution point, which was again a general intervention, she had no proof of her being a mother of a child with disability because she went alone. She was required to go and bring the child as evidence that she was a mother of a child with special needs. And you're talking about a very heavy child being carried from a very distant point just to more or less be a proof to receive food items during the COVID period. And you can just imagine how challenging or mentally challenging that would be, the burden alone on such a person. And so we've not necessarily seen specific interventions targeting women with disabilities.
Organizations such as Abantu for Development, a member of NetRight, had to be innovative in their approach in the implementation of their projects, particularly on affirmative action following restrictions on movements and lockdown. Grace Ampoma Efrifa is the head of programs for Abantu.
We made effective use of technology. So we made good use of virtual means of communication such as Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, and other virtual means of communication. As an organization, we realized that most of our target groups did not have access or did not know how to use some of these virtual means of communication. So we were able to come up with a strategy to engage these groups in smaller meetings where we met them to educate and train them on the use of Microsoft Teams, Skype, and Zoom, and other virtual means to enhance our advocacy work even in the wake of COVID-19.
But in all of these, how has the government of Ghana fared in ensuring women and girls are protected during the pandemic? Cynthia Sunu is the project coordinator at NetRight.
We noticed that the measures that were put in place generally lacked consultation with the general populace. Also, it lacked active citizen engagement with the people that the pandemic actually affects the most. For instance, even with our members, with civil society organizations, you realize that when the pandemic started, most of them had to either fold up, or some had to also return grants to their donors. Persons with disabilities, people in the informal sectors and all that, it affects them differently. Even school children, it also affects them differently. And so government should have consulted all these groups of people before taking measures with grants that government gives to SMEs. Most informal workers are not able to access these grants because they are not able to meet their criteria or requirements. For instance, with the TIN numbers that they are supposed to get, not everybody has or is able to get access to these TIN numbers.
One of our donors, or one of the projects that we are working on, known as Women's Voice and Leadership Project, which is supported by Plan International Ghana with funding from Global Affairs Canada, decided to support its grantees to undertake activities on COVID to address some of the impacts of COVID on women and girls. So we took that opportunity to embark on a project titled Addressing Socio-Economic Impact of COVID-19 on Women and Girls. And in that project, we've done a lot of things. We are looking at how the COVID has impacted on livelihoods and also on the work of women rights organizations, as I mentioned earlier. So this documentary is one of the advocacy tools that we are developing to ensure that people share their lived experiences of COVID, both organizations and some selected few individuals. And we are hoping that this documentary will help us to engage stakeholders and other key actors to ensure that any COVID responses that are initiated, any COVID responses that are embarked on by the government or any other stakeholders, the different constituencies are broadly engaged to know the specific needs of the constituencies, to know the specific needs of vulnerable groups, so that any interventions that are designed are able to address the specific needs of different people with their different needs and the different impacts of COVID.